5, 4.
Michael, once more,
Once more.
happy Wednesday, my brother.
Once more into the breach go we.
Yes, and welcome to all of
Poetry.
you over there.
Yes.
Michael was counting the seconds while open the mics.
Well, in my image, it was like a rocket ship.
Okay,
Like we're ready for takeoff.
ready for takeoff. So hopefully we'll take
expanded.
off.
We're taking off.
Welcome
Hi.
everybody. It's a Wednesday.
It is a Wednesday. It's not just any Wednesday though.
It's Holy
It's Holy Wednesday.
Uh,
Wow, the best kind of Wednesday.
the best kind of Wednesday. So as you may know, we last Sunday with Palm Sunday we started what is called the Holy
Holy
Week.
Week.
And the week was going to go in a crescendo through our liturgies, and tomorrow we will start what we call the Holy Triduum, and at the end of the week, by Sunday, we will celebrate that Jesus Christ is resurrected and back to life, and
Jesus Christ is risen today. But we can't sing the
we
rest
say
of that
that,
song
yeah,
yet.
not yet. So
We'll sing that when Easter comes.
so we thought a good idea today to talk about stuff that happens in Holy Week.
What's going on with Holy Week? Yeah, what's it
And
about?
what do we do? What do we celebrate? And what's the purpose of the liturgies that we do? So without further ado,
Without further ado,
so Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday. Wow. So I was pretty busy with Palm Sunday. I had
Good.
masses at St. Pius. I had a mass at I only work there. Why am I drawing a blank? Holy Family
Right.
in Essex Junction. And for one of the liturgies, I did the full, as much of a procession as we could do.
Yeah.
In the space that we have.
So what I like about Saint Holy Week, but Palm Sunday in particular, is that we reenact what, like, the steps on Jesus's last days with us.
Exactly.
So this Mass of Palm Sunday is different in the sense that it starts most likely in a place outside of the church, and we bless the palms, and also the gospel passage that describes how Jesus asked his disciples to prepare the dinner and entered
Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem.
So having a gospel read at an early portion of Mass like that's very unusual.
Unusual.
But it sets the stage for what the event is.
And then the whole congregation process into the church. So that idea of the procession, it's like the procession we do every Sunday, but now it's the whole people of God filling the church, which is, for me, it's a beautiful scene. And then the Mass goes pretty much as usual, and that on Palm Sunday usually is read the Passion from the Gospel we're reading that year, the cycle. So this year we read the Passion according to Mark. It was, again, the Palm Sunday is to celebrate that triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem last time he went there.
Right.
So it is interesting. It is to reenact that key moment in the life of Jesus, which is also interesting because by Sunday he's entering like almost like a king,
Right.
and then by Thursday he's fading out and almost being dead. So
Yeah, but that transition happens place even within that liturgy because we go from that triumphal entry to reading the
during
Passion.
the Passion. Yep.
And we wear the color red to symbolize that passion. So that's the thought that's tumbling in my mind because that's kind of what I preached on when we did it. But I don't know if I have an end to that thought other than just kind of stating that is something that takes place. But it's I like what you said about how we essentially reenact that procession with the palm branches. You know, people like to get their palm branches. I don't know at the chapel who the presider was. It was Marcel, Father Marcel Rainville. Did he wear a cope?
The cope, yes, he did.
At the Holy Family one, because I looked in the closet and they happened to have a red cope, so I thought, well, I may as well use it. So just to process in. That's a special garb that typically priests wear when there's a procession happening. So I figured, why not? We have it, why not?
So after Palm Sunday, I don't know if you have anything else to say about Palm Sunday. I just don't want to.
No, I think.
No. So one of the things that is not seen as much, but after Palm Sunday, the liturgy is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Has something in common, and the thing is that the first reading are from the prophet Isaiah, and they remind us the songs of the suffering servant. So it's a good way to get ready for what's going to happen.
Yeah, for those that may not know, in the Old Testament book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, there's a section, I think it's chapters 50, 51, 52, something in that area, that tells of, in the words of the prophet, a suffering servant. So an individual that will sort of take the sins of the people upon themselves and, suffer, perhaps even die for the people for a higher purpose. And if it's not entirely clear, the church views that as kind of a prefiguration of Christ, of Jesus Christ. So kind of a model for the way that the church talked and wrote about Christ.
Right. And something that was pointed out in our Mass on Monday, Father Kutcher, he was saying that, I mean, at the moment, for us, the church, to identify the servant with Jesus is pretty simple. But at the time of the prophet's writing, it was kind of hard to understand who is he talking about. Is he talking about himself? Is he talking about the people of Israel? He's talking about the people in the city of Jerusalem. So it was kind of difficult. But for us, we identified very simple and very easily that idea of the suffering servant, the servant that carries upon his shoulder all the sin, if you will, of the people. And of course, for us, it's really easy to equate that with the person of Jesus Christ, because that was pretty much what Jesus did. But I find that sequel of reading the 4 songs of the suffering servant from Isaiah during these 3 days, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. And it also, as I said, prepares us to what is going to happen. One of the things I don't like about those 3 days.
Oh no!
And I preach about that today.
Hold the phone.
In my homily, is that also at the same time the gospel readings present the Judas Iscariot as a thief, as a bad person,
the betrayer of Jesus. And stage for that.
In a few words, making a long story short, my homily today was that certainly Judas Iscariot made a mistake, and he certainly did something that he shouldn't have done. But at the same time, he was one of Jesus' apostles. So Jesus had to have found something good in this person to make it one of the 12, one of his inner circle of people that he trusted. So for me, what happened to Judas was a moment of weakness that any of us could happen.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. I definitely, I always, when I have to preach during these 3 days, I try to say, he definitely did something he shouldn't have, but he's not necessarily that bad. And you can read more about this, and I'll be happy if you want to know more. Write in the comments, because I cannot go further down because it will take a whole video only to talk about Judas. But that was my point today, that Judas definitely a good person that had a moment of weakness. Right. So after Wednesday, when Thursday come, traditionally we have what is called the Chrism Mass. That nowadays, since Vatican II, I'll say,
you can
be moved on Tuesday.
At any point during Holy Week, I think, actually.
So last Tuesday, yesterday, Michael and myself,
some of our other colleagues, and many of the priests of the
Diocese of Burlington, we celebrated what is called the Chrism
Mass at St. Joseph's Cathedral, downtown Burlington. Fun to find parking, but we made it work, and we all got in there. Events like that are interesting, I would say, because you see a big chunk of the priests of the diocese gathered together, which is always fascinating. I mean, I don't know a lot of them as well as I would like to do. It's funny to see all the dynamics and all the personalities kind of get together, everybody buzzing around. It's a good way to catch up with people. But I think it's an interesting image at the beginning of Mass and during Mass when you have kind of that whole big procession of the presbyter, of the priesthood of the diocese coming in, gathered together in one spot, because it doesn't happen often. And there's a reason behind that. Because during the Mass...
So traditionally Holy Thursday is a day we celebrate that Jesus created or instituted the priesthood and the Eucharist, of course. So the idea of doing so, you have the mass that most people know in the evening of the Lord's Supper, when we talk about the Eucharist and the instauration of the Eucharist. But in the Chrism Mass is a mass it was supposed to be on Thursday during the day, but we move it to Tuesday. So that idea is for us priests mostly to reconnect to our priesthood, to celebrate our priesthood.
Right.
So it's a regular mass as any other mass you have ever attended, but that mass has, I think, 3 things that for me are top priority. So the first one is that it's a mass with the bishop and all the presbyterate in the diocese, and 2 things happen in that mass that are key to the Chrism Mass. So the first thing is that the clergy of the diocese, of the clergy that are gathered there, we got to repeat the promises we made when we were ordained.
Right.
So we promised again to celebrate the sacraments. We promised to be servants to the people. So we renew our ministry, if you will, that we did when we were ordained.
Right.
And the second thing important in that mass is that the oils that are used in the church's liturgy, the oil of the catechumens, the oil of the infirm or the sick, and the Holy Chrism are blessed at that mass. So you can bless oils in other circumstances, but diocesan at the diocesan level is the only time of the year where the oils get blessed, at least the Holy Chrism. And those oils there then are distributed among all the parishes in the diocese. And the beauty of that, so the bishop gets to bless the oil of the catechumens and the oil of the sick by himself. But it's beautiful that the Holy Chrism, first there's a part when they mix together the olive oil with the perfume, that it gets that really nice aroma and smell to the oil. It's beautiful. I love it when I do baptisms. My hands always get that smell for a couple of days, so it's really nice. But the beautiful part of that is that during the blessing of the oil, there's a part where we, all the presbytery, stand our right arm. So not only the bishop, but all the priests that are there get to bless the Holy Chrism. And it's very important because the Holy Chrism, that oil, everything that is consecrated with that oil is consecrated to God. So everything that is anointed to God. So that's why we use it in baptism. We anoint the head of those who are being baptized. So that person is consecrated to God. In our ordination, the priesthood ordination, they pour oil in our hands. In the bishop's ordination, they pour it again on the head. And when churches are consecrated, they put chrism oil or Holy Chrism in 12 of the pillars, symbolizing that space consecrated to the Lord, and 12 pillars that symbolize the 12 apostles, who are the pillars of the church. So that's the beauty. For me, the Holy Chrism has a really nice symbolism. That symbolism that everything that gets anointed with it has that consecration to the Lord. So I think it's beautiful imagery right there. So I think that's what is beautiful about the Chrism Mass, that we get to do those 2 things.
Absolutely.
And also, like, celebrating with that bunch of priests.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's always amazing.
It is a lot of fun. I wasn't expecting this yesterday, and I thought that we kind of popped in last minute, but they then told me that, you're going to be one of the principal concelebrants, meaning that I will vocalize part of the Eucharistic prayer. So I said, okay, sure, we'll do that. So that was fun. My assumption is because I'm the youngest priest or the newest priest in the diocese, they wanted that. But it was nice to be asked, and it's just very cool to kind of be up there with everybody.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun.
And of course, because it's one of the important mass. I don't want people think that I'm grading masses, But because of the importance of this mass, and because it's the mass that has almost all the priests to gather together, they also have a lot of lay ministries coming along. So we have processions from.
There's a lot going on.
I saw my brother Knights of Columbus, and there was another group of lay people that I don't remember their name, and I know they're gonna kill me when they see this video, because I'm friend with some of them. But it was good to see, and then the kids from the Catholic schools in the diocese come to this mass. So it's a beautiful mass in that sense that it's not a mass just for us priests to celebrate our priesthood, but we celebrate our priesthood with those who we minister to. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the beauty of the Christian Mass.
I agree.
So Christian Mass.
Christian Mass.
Anything else we want to talk about that?
I don't have anything else to add
to
Christian Mass right now, no.
So Thursday night, that
one's all you, buddy. You're in charge.
Yeah, my brothers asked me.
In charge.
Oh dear God! My brothers asked me to do the celebration, or the main celebrant and the homilist tomorrow.
In a nutshell, it's Holy Thursday, Mass of the Lord's Supper, initiates the Paschal Triduum. So a 3-day cycle. It's really one continuous
celebration,
continuous celebration. But it kicks off with this liturgy of the Lord's Supper, and really the big showstopper, as it were, part of that liturgy is the washing of the feet. Like that's the thing that's different in most people's eyes.
Yep.
So it's kind of mass. I don't like to say mass as usual, because that implies that it's just kind of we're
same thing.
Ordinary going through that. I mean, every time that mass is celebrated, it's extraordinary. But it's the usual form that you might anticipate to have at a mass up until when?
What?
When does the washing of the feet take place?
After the homily.
After the homily.
Yeah. So the idea of the Holy Thursday is that we celebrate the institution of the Eucharist with the people,
which in biblical theology goes back to that Last Supper event.
The Last Supper event. But the way the readings are structured, so the first reading is from the book of Exodus, and it talks about the covenant that God made with the people, the Israelites that were in Egypt, and how he took them out, and the meal, the Passover meal that they had. And that brings us, because Jesus's last meal, Last Supper, was around that celebration, around the Passover meal. So it's kind of setting the background and the theological, or the part of the history of salvation where that meal is instituted by God. And then from St. Paul, I don't remember which one of the letters, but it's like when Paul says, what I got from these people is that this is what Jesus said, this is my body, and this is my cup, this is my blood, blah, blah, blah. So we got those words. And it's important because the gospel selection for that night is from the Gospel of John. And interesting enough, in the Gospel of John, during the description of the Last Supper, a lot of things happen, but there's no meal. Because John already in chapter 6, when he talked about the bread that came from heaven, he already talked about the Eucharist, and he already covered the Eucharist. So at the Last Supper description of John, there's no supper. And what John presents is the washing of the feet, which is really interesting, because then is that conjunction between the Eucharist, which is instituted by Jesus, and it's Jesus, but that conjunction with Jesus as a servant, Jesus as the one who washes the feet of the disciples. And it's very important because, so remember that they're in a time where roads are made out of dirt, there's a lot of dirt, so the washing of the feet was something that was offered to the guests at the house, and they only wash their feet, as Jesus says, because if you're already clean, the only thing that gets dirty in the dirt road, it's the feet. And that was a task that was left to do for the slaves and for the lowly people, if you will. So Jesus taking upon that task and washing the feet was Jesus saying, well, even though I'm your rabbi, your teacher, I'm going to do what a slave usually do. So that idea of service and serving others. So I think that believe that conjunction between the Eucharist and service kind of gives an idea what the Eucharist is about. So the idea is that when we come to the Eucharist, it's not only to be in communion with Jesus, but it's also to become that servant among brothers and sisters, and that's basically the the motions that move that Eucharistic celebration, which is different than a regular Eucharist. But it differs on Holy Thursday that after the communion is given out or giving communion, the Saboria stays on the altar, and after the prayer after communion, the whole church processes to, and we reserve the Eucharist in a different place than usual.
Right.
And
so the tabernacles are kind of opened up.
The tabernacles open, and the one of the things that always gives me an awe, and every year happens the same thing, is that once that the priest puts the reserves the Eucharist in this particular place, the ritual says that people lives in silence, and for me it's, I cannot describe how sad and how it makes a great impact on me when the Eucharist is put in the tabernacle and everybody leaves in silence. I mean, some people stays praying, but there's silence after it. It's deafening, and it's really sad. And as you said, the celebration of the Triduum is continuum. It doesn't stop. So that's why there's no blessing at the end of Thursday. People just go in silence, and the celebration continues on Friday with the Good Friday celebration, and that's all you.
Yeah, I'm doing that one. Oh, I'm doing it. I mean, I'm presiding at the liturgy for that at St. Pius, and because the liturgy did not end at Holy Thursday, it doesn't really formally begin for Good Friday. So there's no greeting as such. There's none of that. We just kind of start with a prayer. There's not even a let us pray. We just start with a prayer, and we go into it. And that's a relatively simple service, simple in the sense that it's very solemn, and there's not a lot of celebratory bells and whistles and things like that, because Good Friday, of course, commemorates the day that Jesus Christ physically died on the cross. So in some ways a very dark day in theological history, but without the death of Christ on the cross, you wouldn't be able to have the glory of the resurrection. So it's the necessary step for that to happen. So the real format of it is a liturgy of the Word. So we share a series of readings, as would happen at a Mass, and we will repeat the Passion narrative that we last heard at Palm Sunday, logically enough, because Good Friday is all about the passion and death of Christ. And there's a special universal prayer, a special kind of prayer of intercession, which is 10 particular intentions that are prayed. A lector reads the prayer. The priest has a prayer of his own to respond to those. Kind of a longer form thing, praying for specific needs of the church and the world, people within the world and within the church, which is a fascinating piece. And then it segues into what's called the veneration of the cross. So there is a big physical cross that's brought out, and there's a certain ritual involving that, but people come up and they show reverence, they show respect to the cross. Some people actually come up and they kiss the cross, others, just touch it or pray before it. It's an opportunity for people to have a reverence for the cross in that way. When that ceremony is concluded, the cross is kind of reposed or put in a place of, I don't want to say display, but it's put in a place where it can be sort of seen and understood by the people. And then the Eucharist is distributed. So the Eucharist that was reposed, as it were, after Holy Thursday is taken and put on the altar. It's not a Mass. It's not consecrated. So it's
there's no consecration.
There's no consecration. It's bread that's already been consecrated. It doesn't happen during this context, and then it's just simply distributed, cleaned up. Prayer is said, and then it ends. There's no dismissal. So it's one of the very, very few days of the year where there is no Mass anywhere in the world that's celebrated.
Yeah, you left out something that.
Oops.
For me, it's one of the key elements of that is that when the priest and the deacon that celebrate in that are the main celebrants in that, they before they come in, they prostrate themselves.
So you lie down flat
on the floor.
Yep, that's very true.
That sense of, for me, the humility connection, but also sadness and
absolutely
and yeah, being sad. I mean, our Messiah has been killed. And the other thing that what you mentioned, that there's no mass that day, but not only is there's no mass, that the churches or anyone in the church is not allowed to do sacraments, to perform the sacraments. Right. Only in case of death during those days. So because we acknowledge the death of Jesus, and we are going maybe again through the death of Jesus. If Jesus is dead, there's no way.
There's no sacraments.
There's no sacrament that can be administered. So from the night of Holy Thursday, when the Lord's Supper is done, until Saturday, then we sing Hallelujah. There's no sacraments in the church. Right. Because we're done. So yeah, Friday finishes, and we segue into the vigil, which now we celebrate at 7 p.m. very easily. But the vigil, so the idea of a vigil is that we stay all night up, waiting for that coming of the Lord, that sunrise. So that's why it's so long, and it's a lot of symbolism. So the first symbol it has is the blessing of the light. So the new light, the world come. Jesus has resurrected, so there's new light, there's new hope for the world. So the mass starting by his blessing the fire and blessing the candle that's going to represent the paschal candle is going to represent the light of Christ in the church. And after that, during Easter, and then anytime there's baptisms or funerals, that candle is lit as a way of celebrating or being the symbol of the resurrected Jesus. And then we have I think it's 7 readings in total, if I'm not wrong. The idea, again, remember that this is a celebration that is supposed to last all night long. Right. And it's supposed to keep us away all night long while we wait. So it's so long because all the readings, what they're trying to do is trying to remember that history of salvation. So we go from Genesis, when God created the world, and then the people of Israel in Exodus, and then some of the kings, and then goes through the Babylonian exile until we finally get to St. Paul's letter, and then we read the gospel saying the disciples found the tomb empty. So that's the idea that keeps us away, and during all that time we're celebrating this. And then after the readings and the homily, we bless the water, the new water. So because the idea is that with Jesus' resurrection, a new creation, and water is one of the basic elements of life. Without water, we cannot be. So the water is blessed. People is sprinkled with water. If there are any catechumens in the parish, this is the time where they will be received into communion with the church, which I think is a beautiful symbolism. So the day that Jesus is resurrected, because the day that they're coming in, and then the mass continues as usual with the Eucharist, and then at the end of the mass, I think that the other symbolism is that we sing the Alleluia, and I think that's beautiful. So I don't know if you have anything else to say.
No, I think you cover it pretty well. I mean, it's kind of the highlight of the church here.
Yeah.
The Easter Vigil, that's what it is theologically. Celebrating the moment of the resurrection, which is what the core of the Christian faith is about. So it's not something to be taken.
And the colors changes. So we change from all that purple that we wear during Old End, and then we go to gold and white.
Gold and white.
And life is back.
Color.
Yeah, it's a great time of the season. And then on Sunday, there's a mass for Easter, which usually is, for my experience, they're always packed with people.
Yeah, and people like to come to church on Easter. It's nice.
Very celebratory and very happy celebration.
Absolutely.
One thing that I did last year was that one of the catechumens that was received into the church for reasons because people that go to the Easter Vigil that night do not have to go to Sunday Mass.
Right.
So what we call the now I forget.
Sunday obligation.
The Sunday obligation is covered by the Easter Vigil. But these ladies, you show up for the Easter Sunday Mass. So what I did was, after the Mass, I called her up and I introduced her to the whole church. And then I asked people that before leaving the church to say hello, greet the
cool.
person. Yeah, so it was nice because again, that's the idea of being in the church, that you get to be a community and you get to know these people, so they are your new family. So I think it was a great thing to do, and I think she enjoyed it. At least she still stuck to me, so
that's a good sign.
Yeah, I don't think she hated it. But that's the idea. That day, in the day of the resurrection of the Lord, it's when we receive new Catholics into the church, and it's a day of great joy. And after that, we have 50 days of joyful celebration, and that finish with Pentecost. But we'll
talk about that when the time comes.
When the time comes. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I
else.
think for now that kind of wraps up a little bit about Holy Week.
Yeah, we were a little long today, but anyways, just as I usually do at the end of every video, subscribe if you haven't done so. Leave your comments if you have any questions, particularly on that Judas Iscariot that I talked today. I'll be happy to answer all your questions. And thumbs up, thumbs down if you don't like it. And we invite you to come see us next week again. Thank you. And I'm going to take 3 hours to turn this off. So
I think we can round down.
So
it won't take that long.
Have a good night, folks.
Thank you.